me about your concert in Java.
Well, I mean, it was an incredible experience, but for me, it was much more. I think I went with all these expectations that I would learn so much gamelan, and I would learn loads of pieces, and in reality, because of that pressure to kind of be able to present something which was going to be on national TV and say, you know, this is, look at this, we've kind of turned these people around, and you had people from 18 reprobates, yeah, from 18 to 35, a mix of people who, you know, musicians, dancers, artists, some people who just had connections with the embassy, and and there was just a very mixed level of commitment. Like you had, like in the Bali group, for example, there was a dancer from Thailand who was 20 and was just absolutely 100% committed to dance, and she would practice every night, and she was just kind of, you know, very dedicated to it and very committed to it. But then on the other hand, there were people who it was just a bit of a free holiday, and like I don't have to, you know, get up at 7 in the morning and do an hour's commute like I do back home in, I'm not going to say where, but and I think that mix of approaches, I think on a lot of levels it's a great project.
But it can polarise as well. Like the more you feel someone's working really hard, if you're feeling slightly lazy, it can kind of drive you away. But it can also galvanise your efforts if you feel like you're not trying. But it's hard if you have to do a shared concert at the end.
Yeah, but I think it was just seeing the actual context in which gamelan exists. I think for me, so it was going to Odalan and going to temples and seeing gamelan competitions and seeing balaganja and you know, just the kind of essential role that gamelan and dance has in Balinese life. I think for me was just really impressive, and I think that was the main kind of thing I took away from the experience. I mean, there was another group I played with a bit, and you know, that was suddenly like, wow, actually it feels like my brain is switched on now, rather than, you know, just playing the same 2 pieces for 3 months. Or I did dance, which I'd never done before, which I wouldn't have, you know.
What dance did you do?
We just did one dance and did it again and again and again. But we did Baraskilak. Actually, no, I started off dancing Rahwana for a ketchak. And the teacher, he didn't even really speak much Indonesian. He just he led through kind of movement.
And you copy.
And you kind of copy, yeah. So that I think that was, you know, that was like kind of relates in a way to what you were saying about how kind of going to Bali really changed your attitude towards playing gamelan, or not quite that.
Started playing it.
You're right. Yeah. And I wouldn't have kind of, if there'd been a sign put up by some enthusiastic dance student, you know, saying come along to this, you know, dance class, I wouldn't have kind of gone along to do it. But having gone into that and suddenly realising how things relate to the ancils and and just that synchronicity, and suddenly it kind of just gave me this whole new spin on it, and just gave me a lot more, not that I didn't have respect for dancers before, but gave me a lot more respect for how much that goes into dancing. You really need to know the pieces so well. And if it's you on stage dancing, you can't, there's no kind of group memory. I mean, possibly there's if it's a group dance, you know, and there might be a little bit of this, but yeah, I think that was another really valuable thing I took away from it. Anyway.
Yeah, and also you were doing dance. How did,
Actually,
how did it help?
Yeah, very much. And I was just think, cause I sort of felt quite obsessed about dancing when I was in Bali, but I'd never done any before. But it was, I suppose I had a few lessons with you, but it hadn't. It hadn't clocked or something. But as soon as I arrived, I was like, I just want to do it, and really felt like I sort of pursued it with almost a kind of anxiety. Like I just need to be able to get better at this. I've got to keep practicing, and I don't think it felt particularly natural at all. Initially, I didn't. I'd never done any dance, so I didn't have a sense of how you kind of learn choreography and things like that. So it was quite a challenge. But but I think I kind of want to do something, and it's a very excellent way of learning something where you copy and you actually start to get more than just the movements from someone. Your whole sort of presentation somehow you can learn, and I've not taught very much since being back, but I taught this group of very small children, and it was kind of delightful thing to realise that they'd somehow, something had been transmitted, like not just like where they would put their hand, but a kind of excitement or something. And seeing somebody else notice that, it's a really great sort of, I hope they can go and teach someone. No, I just took part in a project working with a cellist and pianist who were playing a piece by Benjamin Britten, a Western classical composer, and the cellist was keen to work in this whole concert with various different dancers and asked if I would put together a dance for it, which felt like, I'm not sure I can, but okay, I'll just say yes. And then it was the most enjoyable, sort of exciting thing, but it involved getting to know this piece of Britten absolutely backwards, and it took hours to work out their movements. But it was really fun because I could work from the score, so that was quite a kind of useful way in some ways. I could practice alone and sort of notate what I was doing and things, which I think saved a bit of time because it was quite pressed at the end to sort of get it done. And it felt like a weird way of working that didn't really relate to any process that I mean, that seemed strange, but it was somehow nice to be using these different skills that aren't necessarily supposed to come together. But it was really enjoyable. There was a kind of, I think the sort of features of Balinese dance worked so well with this particular piece. Like, it was very rhythmic and quite surprising, lots of things happening that you don't expect, and kind of musical jokes and suddenly a delay and then something will happen. And to have to choreograph it as I mean, it was just using straightforward sort of Balinese choreography, but it having to connect to the music in that way and then just to a sort of normal audience in London, I think was really effective. And yeah, it sort of made me like happy for Balinese dance. Like, this is a good thing. Yeah, that it's and realising that it's quite different from lots of kind of choreography that might happen in Europe or something, where it's a kind of, it's very responsive to music, but it's quite a kind of loose relationship sometimes, or it's, yeah, there's not a sort of expectation that movement will kind of correspond so directly to the music, and I think that's very intentional. But at the same time, I think there was a real satisfaction about these particular movements absolutely sort of connected. So it's really nice to explore that, and it felt nice to use both worlds a bit, which I often don't. It feels like I'm in one or I'm in the other.
Yeah.
That was my story, sorry.
Pretty good.
I think that's an interesting point you just touched on, that kind of, these kind of separate worlds you inhabit.
Yeah.
And where do they overlap?
Yeah, when they do it, and when they overlap really genuinely, so it's not that you're kind of so I think it's quite easy to kind of
or paying lip
be
service to an idea.
or be a kind of
you,
exotic being in one or the other somehow.
Yeah.
Which can work either way.
Right.
Yeah, I think. Yeah, so nice when you feel that there's like a genuine sort of meeting of skills or thoughts. Defo.
How do you feel, no, I don't know how to put this question. How can you, how do you feel, Lila Cita, I want to put it in the right way.
Sort of develops, or
yeah.
Over the time that I've played, I'm
Yeah.
just trying to think how long I've been. It must be like 3 years or 3 and a bit years that I've played with them. I mean, I think it's hard. It's quite hard to tell in some ways, because I think when you first join a group, you're, I don't know, you join it, but without necessarily sort of criticising it or noticing. You just take part, and that you're so sort of just trying to make sure that you can slot in. But I feel like, I don't know if that's the case from the outside, but it feels like it has more and more life. Like the, I mean, particularly the Kebya group, I guess, like that real spirit of something full of energy and, I guess, Nai was saying earlier, louder and faster. I mean, I guess they seem like very sort of almost simplistic parameters, but that they make a huge difference. And yeah, I feel like people are becoming more dynamic in the way they play. Like, there's not a huge amount of kind of dancing around as people are playing, but there's a bit more kind of physical pride as people are taking part in things. And I think that's seems a very important part of what would make the group. Yeah. Well, I was thinking about the Trina Jaya performances. It feels like they've stepped up and got more exciting. Yeah, and not just because they're faster and louder, but possibly a lot to do with that.
And having those specific goals of performances, I suppose, as well.
Definitely, yeah. Yeah, and I think when
targets to
working with, like, if we're working with puja dancing, there's a sort of real satisfaction in knowing that you think something's improved. But at the same time, it's like, it's quite it matters if I can sort of tell that you think, oh, it's a bit slow or hasn't had much life to it or something. I think that really helps us sort of step up our game.